All right. Again, good morning, everyone. This is Hannah Harmon from the NEI National Office. This is the Competitive Dance Championship Sport webinar, and this is going to be led by the Competitive Dance Executive Committee. So, Angie, I'll go ahead and let you kind of say hello and take control here.
Okay, I'm Angie Heath, and I am the dance president for competitive dance for the NEIA. Also, helping out today will be the rest of our staff that we'll be introducing here in just a minute from our exec committee. Everybody's going to have a part in presenting today, and we'll be introducing everybody as we go along. All right? So did it click over? See, I'm trying. Sorry, I have the capabilities from remote, and it's not letting me click over to the next page. Are you seeing the next page? Because I'm not.
There.
So maybe I don't have it. Sorry. I'm trying still. I'm waiting for it. It is literally just buffering on me. I'm not sure why. Does it show that I'm on there, Hannah?
It's showing that you're on there. I clicked over the next slide. Can someone confirm that they see the slide?
Yeah, I'm on the next slide. I just meant I can't do it, so and I know you're going to have to leave the call, so I was just making sure. Okay.
I'll sit and listen and help click.
All right, sorry. Topics for discussion today, we're going to be talking about leadership, and I'm going to go over that in just a little bit. Declarations and scheduling rules. What does a competitive dance competition look like in the NEIA? And our postseason qualification and competition. Okay, so like I just said, we have a whole exec committee. So we have a president, 2 vice presidents, secretary, and a past president. Our officers were elected from members of the association at the annual business meeting, and they must represent the NEI member institutions in good standing. It's 2-year terms beginning at the conclusion of the annual business meeting, so we are in our first year of the 2-year term right now. We are 2 separate sports. It used to be the executive committee was both cheer and dance, and this is our first year being that our exec committees there is an exec committee for the cheer and there is an exec committee for the dance. So we are strictly just doing dance right here. The current committee is, of course, me, Angie Heath. I'm from Siena Heights University. Our first VP is Danelle Langen. I know I'm going to slaughter her name. I'm sorry. Danelle Langen-Eckert from St. Ambrose University, and who will also be hosting the national championship this year. Our second VP is Alicia Steckler from Morningside. Our secretary is Beth Strom from Concordia, Ann Arbor in Michigan. And our past president is Lindsay Payne from Baker University. We also have a rule book committee, and those members, so who serves on that is our second VP, Alicia, and our past president, Lindsay. And in addition to that, we have Tasha Hinnix from Oklahoma City University, and Scott Crawford, who is our commissioner. And also, in addition to that, we have Kimberly Campbell, who is our liaison and also our resource person for this year. She is also on that rule committee. Our annual business meeting will be April 25th, 2019 at Kansas City, Missouri. And what we do at that annual business meeting is enact changes in the competitive dance plan. Sport motions must be submitted. There will be dates that are sent out to you via emails from Hannah Harmon telling you when your sport motions have to be submitted by. They'll be reviewed and voted on by the coaching body. So what happens is your sport motion comes through. It's presented at the annual business meeting. There is a straw poll vote that is done at the annual business meeting. It then goes out, if it passes the straw poll vote, it goes out to all coaches in a like a Google Doc type document, and you have to go in and you have to, each coach votes on each sport motion. If it passes that, then it goes to the NAC, who will vote on the sport motions at their second annual meeting, which does take place in June. That is why a lot of times we don't know if we have things in place until the end of June, very beginning of July, because of that process, just so everyone is aware. Even though you will be being asked for sport motions, most likely come February. Our sport motion, the Coaches Association takes action through these sport motions. Okay, so a sport rule is specific rules that dictate competition rules. These motions are then submitted to the Rule Book Committee. I'm going to, this is a change from before, so I want to make sure it's very clear that changes to the rule book are now only made every 2 years. So we're going to have to wait 2 years to make changes to the rule book, okay? That does not mean like clarifications, things like that cannot be done, but there cannot be changes to the actual rule book. Policy regulations found in the official policy sections of the handbook. So championship qualification process, minimum number of competitions. These kind of things are motions that will be brought to the annual business meeting, and these motions are then submitted to the NAC for approval. Okay. Also, we have legislation, so anything found in the NAI Constitution of Bylaws must get a co-sponsor and voted on by full NAI membership at their annual convention. That would be something like having a scrimmage. Right now, we are not allowed to have scrimmages. It's just not seen as a thing, I guess you could say. And if we wanted to, that is something that would have to go through legislation that goes. It's an NAI legislative motion. Hannah, Declaration of Intent. I think you're taking over on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will speak to Declaration of Intent here really quick. So when it comes to sports and the NAIA, athletic directors each spring declare by an April 1st deadline of what teams they're sponsoring at the varsity level. So when you hear sponsored, not sponsored, we're just referring to, a sponsored sport. It's varsity, junior, varsity, freshman, where non-sponsored is a club sport. And the way the NAIA views club sports is that, one, it's not recognized by the NAIA. It's not administered by the athletics department. You don't count the official statistics or win-loss records for a club sport. And they may not compete at, in the postseason, which when I refer to postseason, I'm referring to the qualifying competitions and the national championships for competitive cheer and competitive dance. And there are two separate declarations that athletic directors do. They declare for competitive dance, and then they also declare for competitive cheer separately. I know in the past it used to just be one, but now it is broken down to two, so a school can just sponsor one sport or both. So again, with the Declaration of Intent, so once an AD declares that they're going to be sponsoring competitive dance, each team must compete in a minimum of 4 competitions to be eligible for postseason, and then they must compete at the qualifying competition to fulfill their Declaration of Intent. If an institution does not compete in 4 competitions and does not compete at the qualifying competition, then they would be put on suspension for the following academic year. And when you are on suspension during an academic year, there are no requirements that you have to meet to get off of suspension. You just have to kind of serve out that suspension during the academic year. And that has been an increase from 4 contests to 3. In the past it was 3, but we increased it 4 to kind of help foster growth of the sport and encourage teams to continue to build their schedules. And beginning in 2021 season, that will increase to 6. And again, postseason competitions begin with the qualifying competitions. I know a lot of conferences do a conference championship, and that is not considered postseason. In the competitive dance rule books and score sheets, do not need to be used to count on competition towards the minimum and maximum requirements. For example, the Iowa State dance competition that happens every year, you can go to that competition and compete and have that count as one of your countable contests towards your minimum 4. However, those scores then aren't used for your qualification purposes for the national championship. And the coaches will go more into the process of qualifying later in this webinar. So withdrawing from Declaration of Intent, for instance, if for some reason you cannot meet that minimum 4, or you cannot compete at the qualifying competition, you can't fulfill those duties of your Declaration of Intent, your athletics director would have to submit an undeclared form and submit it to the national office. And the deadline to submit this form is basically 4 weeks prior to those qualifying competitions. If that form is submitted within that 4-week window, then that's when the institution would be placed on suspension. And again, when an institution is put on suspension, they cannot compete in postseason for the following academic year. And when they're on suspension, they cannot compete in postseason. Really quick, before I give the webinar back over to the executive committee, I'm going to really quickly touch on frequency of play and scheduling. So with the sport of competitive dance, it's a 24-week season for all practices and competition. There on the slide, you can kind of see the definition of what a practice is, and basically it's any activity organized or directed by someone or a member of the coaching staff of that sport, and appropriate equipment is used, and there's an evaluation of the student athlete that takes place. Again, the minimum number of competitions we need competitive dance teams to have during their regular season is 4, and that's to help them be eligible for the qualifying competition and help meet their school's Declaration of Intent. And then the maximum competitions that a competitive dance team can compete in are 10 competitions within the year. All right, I'm going to hand it back over to the executive committee.
All right. So now we're going to have Alicia Stuckler come in and talk about competitive dance versus sideline dance.
Okay,
Are you
hi,
there,
this is
Alicia?
Melissa. Yep, I'm here. Okay, so for competitive dance, it's a sport that's actually recognized by the NAIA. So practices involving development and or preparation for competition routines must be counted towards the 24-week season. For sideline performances, that's considered a non-sport activity that are not regulated by the NAIA. So it involves non-athletic elements such as crowd participation, and they're non-competitive in nature, and they're non-scored performances or exhibitions. These are activities in preparation for sideline performances and not counted towards the team's 24-week season. So, for example, if you're practicing sideline on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you choose to do a competition practice on Thursday, that will be counted towards your 24-week season because you are doing a competition practice during that week. So for it to not be counted, you need to do sideline for the entire week, if that makes sense. Any competition practice will be counted towards your 24-week season. Does anyone have any questions over that?
I don't have any coming up on my thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now we're going to have Lindsay Payne take over on eligibility.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay from Baker University. NAIA Eligibility Center, all of your athletes that are going to be competing need to go through playnaia.org. They will register, they'll have some stuff they have to submit, and the Eligibility Center will give them a determination as to whether or not they are in fact eligible. Anybody who is considered a first-time NAIA participant, your incoming freshmen, your transfers who did not participate in NAIA competition, or maybe someone that's been at your institution but they didn't participate the previous year, maybe they weren't on your team or anything like that, all of those people will need to go through the Eligibility Center to get a determination. They cannot participate in any kind of exhibition or competition until they have a determination. So that means even if you're taking your competitive team to showcase at a high school event, for example, everyone has to have a determination before you do that, or they will be considered ineligible. Also, along with that, your seasons of competition. If someone will say perhaps they were a transfer student to you, they competed in NDA or UDA, those are chargeable contests against one of their years of seasons of competition. In 2014, 2015, and 2016 National Invitational qualifying events, those are all chargeable. So everyone you have 4 seasons of competition just like every other sport. And so just kind of be watching that stuff. NAI does track how many seasons of competition everybody does have. And if you have questions, contact somebody at the Eligibility Center, and they can kind of help guide you in that process. Your FAR, the faculty athletic rep on campus, can also help you navigate this process and what needs to be turned in, as far as getting people on your short list to help get them determinations. I highly, highly encourage you to reach out to those people on your campus and make sure that you have everybody certified as eligible before you go to anything that you're taking your competitive team to.
Lindsay, one thing I want to piggyback on with that, and I only say this as just to keep an eye out, because I've had students that have transferred in that from other schools that they did not dance at. So I did not realize at the time, I was a newer coach, not realizing that their semesters that they attended will count against them, even though that's not seasons of competition. So I had a dancer that actually completed 10 semesters of full-time school. She was no longer eligible even though she had seasons of competition left. So that is something else to also keep in mind. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, your FARs will be highly, highly helpful because they do this with every other athletic team, and we are exactly like all the athletic teams when it comes to the eligibility process. So really reach out and utilize those people on your campus.
Thank you. We do have financial aid limits. The limits were established at the 2015 NAI convention. Only countable aid to varsity participant applies to the financial aid limit. Financial aid is reported on the year-end report. Competitive dance is limited to 10 full scholarships. It is different than cheer, so if you coach both, do keep that in mind. Cheer, I do believe, is 12, and dance is 10. Okay, so a student who is a varsity participant in more than one sport, their age should be equally prorated to each sport. I am reading a question right now. Just one second. The question here is, last year my AD had to withdraw us from competing, but we are signed up to compete this season. Is there anything or anyone keeping track of suspensions to prevent the AD from signing a team up? Hannah? Are you still on our call, Hannah? She's better at that question.
Angie, this is Lindsay. I can take a stab at it.
I could take a stab at it, but I was scared. I was scared to do it. I'd rather Hannah, so that's why. But go ahead.
Yeah, I actually just asked her this question this year. It completely depends on your specific situation and when your athletic director had to undeclare you. If it was before the 4 weeks prior to qualifying competition, then you're fine. If it was after that 4 weeks prior to qualifying competition, then that's when the postseason suspension comes into play. And yes, the NAI office does track it. So Hannah would be able to quickly look and say yes or no as far as if there is any postseason suspension or anything like that.
She said thank you. All right. Okay, we're going to head into regular season competitions. And Danelle is going to be taking this over here in just a little bit here about the requirements of what you need, but I'm going to take this slide first. So all competitions must have a minimum of 2 teams from different schools present. The teams must be in the same sport, competitive dance. There's no maximum limit on number of teams in the sport. So you can have a dual. And there are many schools, I know, partly because of distance that they have between them. A lot of times they try to get more competitions in, or it's just whatever limitations they have. You can even duel the same team as long as it is a separate competition. You can keep the same judges. You can duel the exact same team that you just dueled, but it just has to be those scores are both going to count. They're separate competitions. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So you just have to have at least 2 teams competing. And I know a lot of schools do that. Here's another example. We've already been requested. We're actually hosting at Siena Heights several competitions this year. And there are several new schools, and they're needing to get, their budget's not very high, and they're trying to get in as many competitions as they can when they travel. So they've already asked us, can we duel before or after your competition? We're coming to your regular competition, but we still need to get another one in. Are we allowed to duel? And so we have honored that request. That's not a problem, and it just gives us an extra competition anyways. I do need to say, though, that the duels do need to be between 2 varsity teams. It cannot be like a varsity dueling with a JV. It cannot be a varsity team dueling with a club team or anything of that nature. You are allowed to compete at maybe an NCAA competition, like at a school with an NCAA school or whatnot. However, if you are not using, if it is not an NAIA competition that is using the NAIA rule book, the officials that are through Arbiter, the score sheet, all of that, the score cannot count into your regular season competition scores. So you are allowed to use that as one of your competitions, but your score will not carry over. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Postseason begins with the qualifying competition. It does not count toward the maximum number of competitions. You have a maximum of 10. You have a minimum that you have to do of 4. Okay? So it does not count towards those numbers for postseason. In many sports, conference championships are postseason. However, in the world of competitive dance, there are not enough conference championships at this point, and that's why we do the national qualifier at the 4 different regions. So the only postseason is that qualifying competition. If you have a conference championship, that is not considered postseason. So that can count towards your minimum, maximum competition numbers. Okay. Stacy Horton just brought something up to my attention. Thank you, Stacy. It was clarified on the webinar the other day for cheer. You can have a duel after a conference championship as long as it's done before the regional qualifier. Some coaches, I guess, thought that was not going to be an option. So you can do it after the conference championship, because I just told you that's not considered postseason, but it must be done. All regular season competition must be done 48 hours before February 22nd, because that is the first qualifier that we have in the country, and all of our regular season must be done. So even duels, anything else you're doing, they must be done 48 hours before. If you have questions, if something is counting as a competition, contact Legislative Services, which is Brenda or Lindsay, and just ask them if it's going to count as a competition for you. That's your best way to find out. Many of you hopefully were on the webinar along with your sports information directors just recently about our new competitive dance statistical system. The scores must be reported to the NAI within 24 hours. Okay, and it posted on the school website under schedule results. And the competition host should submit score sheets of all teams. So this does need to be done. This was gone over in the webinar. If you could not be on that webinar, there is a link that I know was sent out on how to view that webinar. You can email Hannah Harmon, or you can email me. I do have it too, or anybody on the exec committee. We will make sure that you do have that. This is new this year. If you're hosting, you're going to have to put in all the rosters of the teams that are coming. You need to build your competition on this site. I know that I have a brand new SID, so I am helping him a lot, and so he is giving me access to help him with the SID help, and I'm going to actually work with him and build the competitions. I will not be inputting scores. He can do that himself, but I am going to help and make sure that this happens and happens correctly, and I know he is managing many sports at the same time. So make sure that you do understand everything when it comes to reporting the scores, and make sure that so that you can clarify that and make sure that you have a good line of communication with your SID. It is very, very important heading into this competitive season. The NA, like I just said, the NAI rulebook and score sheets do not have to be used to count a competition for the regular season, but your score will not count into your regular season score average if you do not use them. I was waiting to see if there were any questions before I moved on. I have not seen any come up, so if they come up, I'll address them as we go, but I'm going to hand it over to Danelle, who's going to take over the competition facility requirements and officials.
All right. Thanks, Angie. This is Danelle. I'm with St. Ambrose University, the cheer and dance coach there. And I'm going to talk to you guys about competition facility requirements. So for competitive dance, competitive space must be wood or marley floor with dimensions of 40 feet deep and 53 feet wide with surround sound speakers and a well-lit performance arena. So, I don't think you necessarily need to worry about, are our speakers surround sound, but I think the most important thing to keep in mind there is, are they appropriately spaced so that the dancers on the floor can hear the music just as well as, the judges in your audience. So, a quick example, in our gym, when we host any kind of dance or cheer competition, we need to bring in a separate sound system that, our speakers are actually all on one side of the gym. So as you guys can probably guess, when we do any kind of performances and stuff like that at games, one side of the routine is hearing the music just like a split second before the other side, and it just makes us look just a little bit off. So obviously for competition and things like that, you just want to make sure that, the sound is being distributed across the room evenly. If stage lighting is used, no light should shine from the front into the eyes of the athletes. And officials should be seated away from spectators and located high enough to see full competition area. Some dance teams choose to do more of like a dual type competition, and they'll use say a dance facility that's off site, maybe using marley floors that fits in with that dimensions. You just need to make sure that the judges are able to be in a space away from other spectators and high enough to see the entire competition floor to be able to judge that routine appropriately. Staff needed, certified athletic trainers. That's really important just to make sure that they're available and on site in case anything does happen. Security. I know for us, if it's a smaller competition, we wouldn't necessarily worry about, hiring security in to work doors or anything like that, but we do have at Ambrose 24-hour security staffed on campus, and they're available if we were to need them. So I think that would be fine. Somebody to handle admissions, your sports information director and media coordinator, your officials, timers to ensure every team receives the same amount of warm-up time. And also just keeping in mind, if you don't have a separate space or somewhere else for teams to be warming up, that you are, giving them that time to warm up before their performances. And then announcers, sound manager to run music, and event administrator who supervises the day. So obviously, I know there's a lot of other people out there that have hosted way more competitions than I have. So if you guys think of anything, too, feel free to jump in. But I don't have the capability to click to the next slide.
I'm getting you there. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, competition officials. Officials must not be affiliated with competing schools or with each other. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Officials must be registered through Arbiter. So I think there's a couple ways that you can go about doing this. I think, there's some teams that would prefer just to find their judges and make sure that they go about the appropriate steps to get registered through Arbiter, which does include a $25 fee. Some schools I know reimburse those judges for their competitions, that $25 fee, but that most certainly I think is up to the institution. But also, I believe you could also just contact Hannah for a list of judges. And
that is correct.
Okay, and go about it that way, and choose your judges off of the list through Arbiter so that you already know they're already, certified or signed up through Arbiter that way. Number of officials based on number of teams. Regular season competitions with 2 to 3 teams requires at least 2 officials, and regular season competitions with 4 or more teams require 3 officials and 1 safety deduction official. Also, within our 2018-19 competitive dance rule book, it goes into a lot more detail on both of these topics. So the facility requirements, and then also more information on official certification, number of officials, and also responsibilities. So if you guys have any more questions on that, you can definitely refer to the rule book. But I think, you know what? I also was thinking, too, when we were talking about the 24-week season, Alicia mentioned that if you have one practice within that week that is sidelined, and then also, a competition practice, that whole week is still counted in your 24-week season. But also keep in mind that I think you can only have 3 breaks within that time period that you count. So it's not like all throughout the fall you could go 1 week competition, 1 week sideline, 1 week competition, if that makes sense. Is that right, 3 breaks, or is it 2?
Yes, that is correct.
3, okay. So I just want to make sure
correct.
that, if for some reason you used up those breaks, then I guess that week maybe of Thanksgiving or whatever, if you didn't practice, you still have to count that week, if you used up your breaks somewhere else. So I just kind of wanted to mention that, too, because I think some people might not be aware of the breaks.
And the weeks run Monday to Sunday. So, I took a break for Thanksgiving, so I was not allowed to practice that Sunday even coming back. So that's how the weeks run. They run Monday to Sunday, just so you're all aware. So if you're saying you're not going to practice, you're going to take a break, you have to take it from the Monday through the following Sunday. Going back really quick on the officials, though, if your officials are not registered and haven't passed the test, they cannot be officials, okay? Because your competition may not count if those officials are not certified or they're not properly certified. All right. So there's going to be a test that they have to do. It's going to be posted before Christmas. They're actually working on that right now to get that all up. It's going to have video and questions that they have to answer, and a sample of what they a sample like of a certain part of a routine, and they have to score it, things like that. So just to make sure that they are really well prepared and we're having consistency across the entire country, and that everybody is scoring the exact same. I'm going to give, okay, I had a question just really quick. So the requirements, somebody just asked, are the requirements for duels the same, the space and judge requirements? Yes, they are. Your officials, if you're doing a duel, those officials have to be through Arbiter. They have to have passed. They have to be certified officials to be there. And then the required number we already listed that. What the required number is. Duels, you don't need as many though. But all the officials do have to be the same, and the space also needs to be the same. All right, sorry. So I was just answering a question. Beth, I'm going to have you take over for competition day of.
Sure. Thanks, Angie. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth from Concordia, Ann Arbor. So in thinking about a competition day of paperwork to bring, the first thing that you'll need to do is to fill out your performance outline description, which is listed. You can find that all of the paperwork actually online in our Coaches Corner. There's a direct link to the dance appendices too, so you can just click on that and download it and fill it out. So the routine description sheet and outline, we need to submit 4 copies of that, and when you're filling out that description sheet, you have to list the 8 consecutive 8 counts of pom, jazz, and hip hop in the routine with the beginning time and end time in music, and then also include your full team squad leap, turn, and team turn sequence. And so we recommend obviously filling that out in as much detail as possible and as accurately as possible. We'll talk a little bit more in a couple of slides about the requirements for specific routines. The roster is also listed in the appendices as well, and so that roster must be submitted at check-in at each event, and it has to include all participants as well as any traveling alternates. So make sure to list all of the team names. So both the performance outline and the roster will be turned in at check-in for the event, typically to the host coach or the event manager at check-in. Also keep in mind that you need to bring any registration payment if the competition requires payment, and then also thinking about appeal paperwork and payment as well as backup music. So just really reiterating the importance of being prepared in case something does happen, to make sure you have that appeal paperwork on hand as well as payment for the appeal. That appeal paperwork is also listed in the appendices section online too, so you can take a peek at that, print one off, and bring it with you just to be prepared. It's always helpful to have backup just in case something happens with your music at the competition. And so whatever method that you prefer to use, just making sure that, again, you're communicating with the host institution of what options are available for music.
Also, there's been a few questions here, Beth. And just there was a clarification that was given that some schools may ask for the performance outline prior to give to officials. You have to do it for your qualifying competition. That way the reason the schools ask for it ahead of time is so that the officials can look it over, and then if they have questions or they can make notes, they're a lot more prepared, and you will get a much more consistent judging if we do have those ahead of time. Right. Somebody did ask, though, about how music is given. Beth, you want to address that? Because it depends on who is hosting, but just it's a new coach that's asking, how is music given, USB, emailed, or what?
Mm-hmm. It really does depend, and that's what communicating with the host institution of if they're, again, if you want to turn in the routine description sheet, or if they're asking for that ahead of time as well as the music. I know for competitions I've been to, we've emailed the music in advance, and so that way the host institution is prepared with the music. Some institutions ask, have you play your own music? So again, it's just communicating with the host institution as to what they're asking for.
Also, what happens, Beth, if you have changes after you've already submitted your performance outline? Maybe there was a change at the last minute.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Angie.
Well, I was just going to say, just highlight it somehow. like in red, somehow make it a different color, just
Yeah.
highlight it. They need to see that. They're not going to see if you just write it in. Like
Correct.
it needs to be highlighted so they can see that.
Yep, I was just going to say the exact same thing. So just
Yeah.
making sure that you're communicating that so that, again, because if it's not communicated that that change has been made, there are different deductions that could occur if your routine is performed differently than what's described on the description sheet.
We also, there was somebody that said if you're a host institution, thank you, Stacy. If you're a host institution, I recommend having clearly marked designated appeals area at the competition with blank appeals form available to coaches. But you should have a clearly marked area for them to appeal so they know right where to go, especially if you're hosting and, I mean, you're coaching yourself. It's very difficult to have everybody coming up and asking you. So the more prepared you are and the more you have things clearly marked so that you can worry about coaching and not worry so much about hosting, it just helps you out a lot. Also, something else that was brought up is all coaches make sure that you do have your cheer dance, AACCA, your ACCA coaching certifications up to date. Make sure you have them up to date because you need them up to date as well. Okay. All right. Heading into the appeals process, Lindsay is going to take this over. Since I just brought up the area, now you can take it over.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of go through a day if you're at a competition and you get your scores and you feel as though something needs to be appealed. As was just brought up, it's helpful if there's a clearly designated appeals area. One thing that we have not discussed and hasn't really been brought up and not in any of our information, if you're hosting a competition, it's highly encouraged to have a coaches meeting prior to. I know some don't, but you really should, so that you can let coaches know where that area is, how that appeals process is going to work. So you can appeal things that are only in relationship to you. You can't appeal for another team. What is appealable? A mathematical score error. A difficulty range is incorrectly shifted down because officials missed the execution of the skills. It's going to be a lot easier to kind of appeal that, and especially in our team turn sequence now because the difficulty is separate from the execution. But please remember, you could be dropped down because your execution was poor, not because they missed the degree of difficulty. And execution scores are not appealable. If you have an incorrectly applied safety infraction or an incorrectly applied deduction, if it's a deduction, obviously it's going to be video reviewed. If there is a mistake in deductions, then you can get clarification by the event administrator, If deductions were added incorrectly or deductions were added when there were no deductions, then the deduction score can be changed by the decision of the head official. If there is no head official for the contest, the panel officials have to make a unanimous decision. Again, you cannot appeal execution scores or overall routine scores. And this part is really important. If you, please be aware that you have 10 minutes after you receive your score sheet to do an appeal. And so if you have a team member going to pick up your score sheets, just know that 10 minutes starts once a representative from your team goes and picks up the will cost, you have to have 50, you can have cash or check. Excuse me. And if your appeal is upheld, so you were correct as the head coach, then you get your $50 back. If the appeal is denied, then the $50 will not be returned to you and it will go to the NAIA. One other quick note, if are the last team, we'll say there's only a duel and there's not 10 minutes after the score sheets, then, excuse me, you have to have your score sheets and your deductions 20 minutes before the final results are announced. So score sheets and deductions.
Lindsay, there's a question on here for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why can other teams not make appeals for other teams? Example, from last season, if a team competes with too many or too few of athletes.
that is something that we're working on with the officials training. Unfortunately, that the part of being the addition of the appeals process was not able to point fingers and potentially challenge other teams and other teams' scores. We wanted to fit for how. So that should be if you're competing with too many or too few, that's a rule violation, and that's a 5-point deduction. And again, we're really trying to push that forth in the officials' education. It should be something that's caught immediately because you do have to write on the top of your performance outline how many people you're competing with. So that should be something that we're looking with the officials. And hosts should be able to, circle this out on the administrative, so it wouldn't be an appealable thing. But we wanted to stay away from teams being able to appeal things for one another because most likely to get influx of appeals. I think that's everything on the appeals. Were there any other questions, Angie?
Nope, that's been it so far.
And all that,
up, I'll let-
Yep,
go
all
ahead,
that
sorry.
information is page 8 of the rule book. So, what I encourage, if you feel like maybe you need to file an appeal, once you get your score sheets and you look at them, if you feel like there was an incorrectly applied deduction or whatever, you have video that shows that, that's great. However, you will not be able to use that video in your appeal. It will be the video that that is part of their host duties. So that will be the video that they utilize, not necessarily your video. So just keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. As we head into this, I just want to, I'm going to answer somebody's question right now actually on this slide. So I won't answer it because it's going to be answered. I also want to clarify that the person that brought up that question about the ACCA certification is if you coach both cheer and dance. So even though, yes, you may be a dance coach, if you are coaching both, which quite a few are, you have to have that ACCA certification. If you are just dance completely by yourself, you do not have to have it. But if you coach cheer and dance, you have to have it. Okay? Thanks. So competitive dance, we have one division. Males are allowed to compete. So you can have an all-female team. You can have a co-ed team. It's up to you. The routine must be at least 1 minute 45 in length and cannot exceed 2 minutes 15 seconds. Roster limits, minimum of 6 and maximum of 16. Now I will say I've had several emails sent to me with this question that they've lost somebody due to injury or whatever happened, eligibility, and now they're only going to have 5. Can they still come compete? Yes, you can come compete. It's going to be a rule infraction. So even though it says the roster limit's minimum of 6, maximum of 16, if you're going to come compete with 5, you're going to get that 5-point rule infraction for not having the minimum number required, just to make sure everybody's on the same page and understands. It does not mean you have to undeclare. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. You can still stay and declare and stay varsity and stay in postseason. You just will get a 5-point rule infraction when you compete. Okay? The average number on varsity in the 2016-17 season was 11. The format is a combination routine consisting of jazz, com, and hip-hop styles. You have to have 8 consecutive 8 counts of each style. Okay? There's no time requirement per style, but you must have 8 consecutive 8 counts of each style. So breakdowns and requirement, minimum of 8 counts of jazz, minimum of 8 counts of hip-hop, and a minimum of 8 counts of pom. And they can also be in any order that you choose, as long as you have your minimum of 8 counts. You also need to have a squad leap performed by all members at the team level. For example, maybe you're all going to do the right leap, maybe you're all going to do a switch leap, maybe you're all going to do a center leap. I am going to let you know right now, there is a little note down at the bottom. We did not have time to get the slide fixed, but it is the the clarification is already going up on the rule book. It just so that everybody is clear that the squad leap must prep and land in unison. When we go to the turn, the squad turn performed by all members at the team level. Whatever that team turn is, you need to prep and you need to end exactly the same. Same goes for the squad turn sequence performed by all members for at least 2 consecutive 8 counts and together. That must prep together. The entire 2 8 counts must be completely the exact same, and then you must end all together. Okay, so just to kind of clarify that, what it could mean is, let's say that I have a couple on my team that I want to have turn longer than those 2 8 counts, or, I mean, if you want your whole team to go longer than the 2 8 counts, they can, but for those 2 8 counts, that has to be completely the exact same. So I'm going to have them all prepped together. They're all going, let's say that, let's just be very basic, and they're all just going to do 2 straight 8 counts of turns in second. So they're going to do that, and they're going to land completely the same. Now, then I could have my extra, maybe I want some girls to keep turning. Maybe I want my male to keep turning. They re-prep, they go in, and they can keep turning. But everybody needs to end in unison and begin in unison, and the entire 2 8 counts needs to be in unison. Okay, same thing goes for, you know, every team element. That is so that clarification is made, is being put into the rule book. I know it's implied by many people, and it was just a clarification. It's not a rule change. It's always been there, but it just wasn't specifically laid out, and it didn't make it into the slide. But the exec committee wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that that clarification is going in. There is also going to be a I will go back. I didn't know what slide I was on next. There's also an appendix that is attached now with all the illegal things like rubber bands, back handsprings, whatever. There are many, so it actually lists out what is illegal to do. Lindsay, would you like to expound on that since you're on the rule committee?
Yeah, sure. Someone.
Lindsay, are you there?
Yes. Not sure. Is everybody on mute?
If you star 6, you can go to mute. Because we're hearing something on this end.
Definitely.
We're hearing music. Everybody star 6 and go to mute. I don't know who is not on mute, but somebody's definitely not on mute. Lindsay, can you try to talk over it?
I'll do my best. So if you look at the very last of the rule book, there is an appendix just did. Yeah, allowed. Not allowed.
Yeah, we can't hear you at all, Lindsay. Everybody's saying that. That music is so loud we can't even hear you. Because I know Lindsay's going to be coming up here shortly too, so we're going to need to hear her. So make sure that you're all on mute, please. Can you all hear me, though, I hope? Lindsay, can you hear me?
I can hear.
I can hear you, Angie. I can hear you pretty good.
All right. Well, I'm going to really quick. I had a question anyway, so I'm going to answer that. Hopefully, we'll get somebody muted. Somebody asked me, do we end exactly on the same count or end with the same movement? Out of our turn sequence, some finish into a prep, into a toe touch, and others finish into a low V to one knee. Does that count? So you all need to end the same. So as long as you just end, and that's the end of that 2-8 count, then you can prep. But as long as you all come out together the same exact way, then you can prep and go into whatever you're doing. So if they all came out of that turn sequence and you just all hit some like just jumped out or whatever it might be, then they can prep and go into that toe touch, and other ones can go to that low V, but they do all have to end together. I hope that answered your question. Did that, hopefully, Tamara? Maybe? Lindsay, we might be able to hear you now because the music is gone.
Okay. So the very last page of the rule book, there is a new appendix that has been added that is just common skills that are often asked. Is this allowed? Is this not allowed? So this is not an all-inclusive list. This is just common things that people ask quite a bit. If you have a very specific question about something that's not on this list, film the skill and then send it in to Hannah, and it will be reviewed whether or not it is or is not allowed. So again, this is not an all-inclusive list. It's just a quick reference, some things that people ask quite a bit. Can we do this? Can we not do this? So it's just a new appendix to kind of hopefully help you and your choreographers as you guys are working through some stuff.
And I will say that if it's a clarification when it comes to anything with the rules, you can certainly ask me, ask anybody on the exec committee. But especially if you go to that rule book committee, they could really help you. And that, again, is Lindsay, Alicia, Tasha's on that. So, you could go to them with your questions just because I'm actually not on it, either is Danelle. That's the way it's set up, that we're not on the rule book committee. Yes, we do communicate, but questions, especially when it comes to clarifications on rule book questions, is great to go to them. I will still take it to them, but you can always come to me, or Hannah, because Hannah will also go to them. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware about that. National championship qualifying. Okay, so 2019 qualifying competition deadline is Saturday, February 23rd, 2019. So there is going to be one on that Friday. It's the Northwest qualifying competition at Midland University on February 22nd. The other three are all going to be on the same day, February 23rd. Southwest will be at Oklahoma City University. Southeast will be at Baker University, and the Northeast will be at Siena Heights University. And there is a link on there if you don't know what your grouping is and where your what qualifying competition that you're supposed to be going to. You will be getting information mid-January, I would hope, by then, because we're supposed to have a conference call for all of the hosts of the national championship qualifying competitions at the very beginning of January. And I will tell you that we are all going to run our competitions the exact same. So wherever trying out for All-American falls on that day, it's all going, our timelines are going to be as similar as we can make them. Obviously, we can't make them exactly the same because we might have more dance teams than cheer, or one other group might have more cheer than dance, or whatever it may be. But we are going to follow a lot of the same timeline just to make it fair across the board. And there's been a lot of communication already between all of the qualifying competition hosts. So you will be getting all of that information, and we'll be able to plan for that as far out as we can possibly do. The 2020 qualifying competition deadline is going to be Saturday, February 29th. For championship dates, the 2019 National Championship deadline is March 8th and 9th, 2019. It is at St. Ambrose University. The following year, 2020, it is also again at St. Ambrose University, and the dates will be March 13th and 14th. So just so that you can plan, how our national championships work is they go in 2-year increments. So they were the past 2 years at Oklahoma City University, and now these upcoming 2 years are at St. Ambrose University, and there will be a bidding that will go out if you would like to host. That will be coming up for 2021 and 2022 in the near future, so keep watching for that. But you will have an opportunity if you would like to host the national championship after 2020. Qualifying competitions, bid process to NAI institutions to host the 4 qualifying competitions. National office leads the process, assistance from the coaches associations. All right, so you will get an email from Hannah saying if you would like to put in a bid to host a qualifying competition, you may, and there is, you have to fill out, there's a link that you go to, and you have to fill out your facility specifications, hotels, things like that that you have to fill out in there, what you're estimating the cost to be, all of that, and you can fill that out and to try to, if you would like to host a qualifying competition. And then that is decided and announced later on. I feel like the deadline for saying that you want to host, I feel like it was May 15th, but it might have been even June 1st. But I cannot remember right now. Sorry. I know I've hosted 6 years in a row. I should know this. But so anyways, we would love to have, more people putting in bids. I know there's sometimes there's been a shortage of people putting in bids for hosting. The teams are grouped based off of your conference affiliation, and also, so what happens is if they're going to keep all the conference, even though we do not everyone has a conference championship, they keep the conferences together. So I'm going to use me as an example. I'm in the Wolverine Hoosier Athletic Conference. We have a cheer conference. But we are a conference sport for cheer, but we are not yet a conference sport for dance. We do not have enough teams yet. So we probably will be by next year. But just because we do not have a conference championship, our conference still stays together when we go to the qualifying competition. So they do not break up conferences as if they can at all help it. The national office is really big on trying to keep all the conferences together. So like there'll be 3 or 4 conferences sometimes at a qualifying competition. Maybe if their conference is really big, there's maybe only 2 conferences at that qualifying competition. But just so you understand, so that's why some people may be driving a little bit of a distance because they're trying to keep all the conferences together. There's a prelim and a finals at the qualifying competitions. It's a 1-day competition. You will do your prelim, and it's a random seating. So a random order. Sorry. So everybody goes in a random order. Once your prelim scores are out, the teams are seeded for the final competition. So if there were 13 teams and the lowest score of all 13 teams will go first for the finals. The highest score for all 13 teams will go last for the finals. Okay? 25% of a team's prelim scores accounts for their final score, and the final competition routine is the other 75%. That goes together, and it makes your score for qualifying. What does that mean? Well, it means a total of 12 dance teams will advance to the national championship. The top team in each sport at a qualifying competition receives an automatic berth to the national championship. The reason that score is so important comes in now for the at-large berth. Okay, so any declared varsity competitive dance team who competed at a qualifying competition will have their final scores compiled, ranked highest to lowest across all groups. there's going to be a year-end score that is created, which it says cheer on there, but it should say dance, sorry. Regular season competition scores are reported through your SID help using the NAI score sheets. It's all averaged together, creating that average season score. 40% of your average season score and 60% of your final qualifying competition score are added together to create your year-end score. Okay? Year-end scores are then used to rank the teams in order from highest to lowest across all groups. And the at-large berths are then awarded to the 8 highest year-end scores that did not already receive an automatic bid. Now, what can happen, I just want to make sure for all new coaches. So this has happened before, at least it happened on the cheer side before. I think it's happened a few times on the dance side. Somebody might get an automatic berth because they won their qualifying competition. When you see the rankings come out, they may not even be in that top 12, but they are automatically going, and they are going to be one of those 12 dance teams that is going to the national championship because they received an automatic berth. Those 4 teams that win each qualifying competition automatically go, no matter where they fall in that ranking. It'll be the next 8 after those that fall in line that get to go for their highest score. So you may be sitting at 12. I know it's happened to me before, by the way. So you might be sitting at 12, but if there was a team below you in the ranking that got an automatic berth, you're not going to go to nationals. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. I just wanted to really explain that because sometimes it can be very confusing when you look at it. And this is why, to us, it is so important on the exec committee and in the NAI that our officials are being consistent across the country, that all of our scoring is being really consistent and really together because you do have 40% of your season score. And also we want to make sure all of our qualifying competitions that the judging is consistent so that, because these scores really matter because 60% from that day is going in to make your year-end score. So just so that you understand how that works and that process. The competition format at the national championship is the same as the qualifiers. Okay, the national championship is a 2-day event. Preliminaries are held on day 1. Finals are held on day 2. So it's not a 1-day event, it's a 2-day event. Okay, the Cheer and Dance National Championship is under the direct control and supervision of the NAI National Office. The championship committee is responsible for the management of all performances and welfare of participating teams and coaches. The NAI site supervisor and the championship committee will conduct a tournament coaches meeting, work with a coordinator of officials, and coordinate both pre- and post-championship ceremonies. The championship committee will be selected by the NAI National Office. They did an average on postseason expenses, and the competitive dance average for attending the national championship was $6,295. Now, obviously, it matters if you had to fly, if you have to drive. Okay, so for like example, mine was higher than that. I've had to fly to Oklahoma City the last 2 years. This year, being at St. Ambrose, I'll be able to drive, take a bus. My cost will come down. So it just depends on where it's at and your proximity to the national championship on what your postseason. It also depends on the size of your team on what your postseason expenses would be. Awards. We have the NAI Scholar Athlete Award and the Scholar Team. I want to talk about both of those first. That is something that your SID will submit. It might depend on your school. How it works at my school is the SID actually asks us to give them their student ID numbers and their names and give them some information, and then between that and our FAR, they check and make sure that everything is right, and the SID does submit it, but our SID does ask me to at least give them the beginning information to get it going. To be an NAI Scholar Athlete, it has to be a junior or senior and a 3.5 or above. The Scholar team, it has to be above a 3.0. And there are these quality points and these other things that go into that. Our registrar is who actually figures all of that out. I just have to give my roster and at least at my school, I have to give my roster and I have to give their student ID numbers and all of that. And then they make sure that they are, and then SID submits it for us. So just those are things that are due late. It's after our nationals. You will receive an email, or maybe your SID will. My SID always forwards me on that. So anyways, just so you're fully aware about those are not things that are presented at the national championship. This is all, those two things are done completely after the national championship, and it's usually like May, June, I do believe. Individual champions of character. Lindsay, can you go along with this one? I know we do this at, this is different than what we do where we ask them to, at the national championship, to go and do like the service community. This award is what we do at conference championships, correct?
No, the Individual Champions of Character Award is for each team that makes it to nationals, nominate someone who is their team's champion of character. The NAI is no longer doing the team champion of character, what's done at the conference level.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, I'm sorry. I got confused. I was on the cheer call the other day, and it confused me when they were talking about that. Now, you may have a conference championship, which means you will have, however your conference is set up, you will have scholar athletes within your conference. You could have an individual champion of character within your conference, but what we are discussing right here is only at the national level, just so you're fully aware. Coach of the Year is something that is voted on postseason. It is something that you'll be asked to vote for, anybody, and it is something that is done completely after the national championship, and that award is presented at the annual business meeting to the Coach of the Year for dance and the Coach of the Year for cheer, and it's done there. And all the coaches are asked to vote on that. Not just coaches at the national championship. It used to be that way several years ago, and that was changed. So this is something that everybody gets to vote on. As we head into the All-America Awards, I'm going to hand that over to Lindsay because I asked her to take this over. Go ahead.
Okay. Real quick, I just wanted to throw out there, you guys should get an email about this, but the NAIA Scholar Athlete Award is actually due to the NAIA by February 15th. So that is prior to nationals.
Okay.
Yep.
They don't announce it until like June or something, do they? It's late.
Team awards are announced in June. They will announce Scholar Athletes at nationals.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries. The All-American information can be found in the coach's manual. How the All-American works is there will be a routine that is choreographed that is posted on the NAIA Coaches Corner at the end of January. Those people who are eligible or that you would like to do that, have them learn that routine. Routine and music are the same at qualifying competitions. They are then scored on that routine and knowledge of it and all that good stuff. Other things that they have to do, they have to have 3 leaps, 2 of which must be 3 to 5 on that dance rubric. So you cannot link leaps together for the purposes of determining All-American. So if you go back, you have to kind of flip back and forth, but if you go back over to the rule book, we have that technical skills rubric. And again, I said the 3 to 5 point range, so that's actually the bottom 2 categories. Anything from that would count toward All-American. But again, 2 of their 3 leaps must be from that 3 to 5 point range. They have to have a solid triple pirouette. The turn combination, that's also released at the same time as the choreography that is taught, and that routine is 4 8 counts of jazz, 4 8 counts of palm, and 4 8 counts of hip hop, and then as well as that turning sequence. They will be judged by those officials that are at the qualifying competitions. If they receive an average of a 2 or below on a section of the state, they are not considered, they're removed from consideration for being an All-American. So their average has to be above a 2.0. So they're scored 1 through 5 on their leaps, their pirouette, their turn sequence, and the choreography. And again, if they receive that 2.0 or below, then they're that average, of 2.0 or below, then they're removed for consideration. To be an All-American, they have to score at least a 16, and to be considered honorable mention, they have to have at least a 12. So 12 to 15.9 is honorable mention, and then 16 and above is All-American.
And that video, we're hoping that it'll be out mid-January. So it will be out earlier than it has been in past years to give them time to prepare for their audition for All-American. I want to, before we start to close this up, I just want to direct everyone's attention to make sure that you are really looking at the performance outline, and we're going to go over this more tomorrow on the conference call, but we really need to make sure that we are filling out the dance performance outline correctly, that we're looking at all the appendices, because we do have a new score sheet. Make sure you're familiar with it. When you're filling out the outline, there is it says right there, like the beginning time in the music, the end time in the music, your total time, so your total 8 counts, and then what the style is. Maybe, okay, so like let's say that I have a, then it says team skill and point range. Let's say that I have my team turn in my jazz section. So I'm going to put my beginning time of music, my ending time of music, my total 8 counts. So for that, it's going to probably not be very long. And let's say for my style, I'm going to put jazz. On the team skill, then I'm going to say team turn. And then I'm going to put a semicolon, and I'm going to put, I'm going to use the example that's already on the dance performance outline. It says triple pirouette, 3 to 4 point range. Okay? Now, where this is different, team leap will be the same way. When you're filling out your team turn sequence, you need to put what style it is in. You need to put, though, on that team skill and that point range, you need to put in there, like, not just describe what it is. You need to put, like, prep 7-8, changing spot, like whatever it is that you're doing, you need to put that out to the counts exactly. Double pirouette, the next 7-8, whatever you are doing, make sure that you are being very specific with the counts, not just the point range and the actual, like what it actually is. It helps the judges to, the officials to know exactly how many 8 counts you're actually doing, like so they can see it specifically and they know where to watch for that prep. They know where to watch for exactly what you're doing in your turn. It just really helps, and it can be very confusing sometimes if we do total time, total 8 counts. Some people go on and do other things after that team turn, and sometimes they've included it in there. So that is why it's the best if you just write out the exact counts in there. I know that the space is very small. That's why it's helpful sometimes to download that and type that in, because that space is kind of small to put all of that in. I've even sometimes gone down another box and put more in there and then skip down. But you need to make sure that you're being very specific on that performance outline with that. Our outline is not that difficult to fill out, so make sure you're very familiar with that rubric. Make sure you are very familiar with your team technical skills rubric. Make sure you're very familiar with that score sheet. Now we have a difficulty, an execution, and a uniformity range on all three of our genres of dance, of jazz, pom, and hip hop. Make sure you are familiar. We also now have a musicality score that is going in there. So, and our team turn sequence is 10 points. It's 5 points for difficulty and 5 points for execution. Okay, so for 10 total. The team turn and the team leap are still 5, but these changes were all made from Sport Motions and the annual business meeting, and then it was voted on by everyone last year. Just make sure you are very familiar with that. It helps you just when you are, so that you're very familiar with everything so there's no surprises at the end. Lindsay, do you have your hand raised? It says you do.
I do. I wanted to piggyback on what Angie is saying, especially with regards to the performance outline, and that too. It's really going to help the officials know when you're prepping and you're ending in unison. Also, when you look at that skills rubric, the biggest difference between 3 to 4 point range and the 4 to 5 point range on that turn sequence is you're doing full 8 counts of turning sequence. So you're prepping on 7, 8 to get into that higher level of difficulty, and you're landing on 1, 2. If you look at the turn sequence in the 3 to 4 point range, they're prepping, the example given, they prep on 2 and they land 7, 8. So that's not a full 2, 8 count, so that is going to be better. And the other thing I really want to point out is anytime you see in any of the rubrics where it gives an example and it says, uses words like minimum, make sure that you're aware that if you're doing the minimum, it's going to be towards the lower end of that difficulty range. Just something to keep in mind as we're moving forward.
Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, so resources, like we've mentioned many, many times, I'll tell you right now, I go there all the time, the Coach's Corner. Okay, so make sure, especially if you're looking for competitions to attend, even at the Coach's Corner, there's a link there where you can see a list of competitions, but it also gives our emails from the whole exec committee. You can contact any of us, ask us any questions. But that Coach's Corner is so helpful. It has your appendices. It has your coach manuals. It has the rule book. It has everything that you need. So make sure that you are really using that resource. I probably go to it 5 times a day. So make sure that you really are feeling very comfortable with everything heading into this season, especially because we've had several changes. So like I said, if you have questions, you may contact Hannah Harmon. If it is something that she needs to talk to the rulebook committee or the exec committee, she will forward that on to us, and then she will get back to you on that. The Eligibility Center, if you have any questions, we have a phone number and also how you get a hold of them so that you can make sure that if you had any questions. Like I've had some issues. One of the things that's new this year, and I know other sports at my school have had the same issue, is that they are asking, they're really, if somebody wants a fee waiver, they're like really making that the high school's responsibility now. They're really trying to get them all to use this portal. And some of the high schools are not signed up into it, so I know that has been an issue for several sports at my school. But if you have any questions about that, we've actually had to call the Eligibility Center quite a few times. If you NAI Official and Policy Handbook. If you need to talk to Legislative Services, that is how you get a hold of them. Their phone number and their email are listed there. Do we have any questions? I've not had any in a very long time on my thing. I'm looking. So I'll leave it for a few minutes and see. All right. Well, tomorrow, don't forget, we have a conference call at the exact same time, 10:30 Central Standard Time. It does say a new coaches call. I will tell you that I did get on the cheer conference call yesterday, and it is very helpful even if you are a returning coach. It is extremely helpful to be on that call. I thought it was great, and I actually learned a few things along the way. And but it's extremely helpful for new coaches. We are going to be going more in depth about certain things. If you have questions about the required team elements, if you have, we're going to talk about the performance outline. We're going to talk a little bit more about appeals. We're going to talk about what it's like going to the qualifying competition, what to bring with you to competitions, things like that. We're just going to go more into detail to make sure that everyone is very well prepared heading into this great season that we have ahead of us. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone helping out today on the exec committee. Tomorrow they will actually be helping a lot. The exec committee is going to all be taking over a certain area of the conference call, and we'll all be working together on that. And so if you think of any questions, you make sure you write them down and make sure you come with questions tomorrow, and hopefully we'll answer quite a few of them for you. I did have a hand raised, but it went away, so I think we're okay. So we'll talk to everybody tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angie.
Thanks.
Thank you.